I came off the back of, we had these regional tournaments called Road to Nationals. I came off the back of winning 5 of them in a row. I don't know if anybody else did. I think there was maybe one guy in New York that did it. That was when I was at the top of my game. I think I'm going to win this. I want to be a pro player. And then Michael Hamilton started playing Flesh and Blood, so I quit.
Hello and welcome to episode number 88 of the Hobbies and Happiness Podcast, where we talk about the hobby that makes us happy, tabletop gaming. I'm one of your hosts, Dan.
And I'm Jim, and today we're talking with Brendan Patrick.
All right, so yeah, today we're talking with what do we call him? A scrub? Is he a scrub?
Former pro Flesh and Blood player turned scrub.
There we go.
Yes,
I like that better. Brendan, we're kidding, man. We're totally kidding. Now, before we get into the episode, we need to talk about our sponsor, Amazon Audible. If you head over to our affiliate link, www.audibletrial.com/hobbies and happiness, sign up for your free 30-day trial of Amazon's audiobook service, Audible. And when you sign up for that free 30-day trial, you get a free credit added to your account, a free credit for any audiobook on the service. What's better is if you're an Amazon Prime member, you get 2 free credits added to your account. So, and those credits never are going anywhere. They don't go away. So if you cancel that service before the end of that 30 days, you get to keep those credits on your account for forever. Forever. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. You get those credits forever. So head over to our affiliate link, sign up for that trial, get those credits added to your account, and then use it for an audiobook that you can listen to on your commute. All right. So again, head over to that affiliate, and click that affiliate link, sign up today. All right. This is a fantastic conversation. This conversation was one of those conversations that we couldn't stop talking.
Yeah.
This was it flowed. I really felt like it just flowed very seamlessly throughout the entirety of the interview. We had a fantastic conversation with Brendan. Brendan, I want to say he's no stranger to card games, but when I found out that Flesh and Blood was his first card game, I mean, talk about mind-blowing explosion.
It's been, what, 5 years?
I think it came out in 2019. I want to say it came out in 2019.
Okay.
So, and just listening to him talk, he very much sounds like somebody who's been doing this literally his entire life. Mm-hmm. But then listening to his background, his backstory, it was just a phenomenal conversation. So, guys, you know what? I think you're going to learn a lot from this episode, not from us by no means, but from Brendan, and just the way that he talks about these card games is just, honestly, when you hear it, you feel a lot smarter. And that's how I felt. That's really how I felt. So without any further ado, let's get right into the conversation with Brendan Patrick. All right, joining us today on the podcast is Brendan Patrick. Brendan is like he puts it, an amateur Flesh and Blood player, also co-host of multiple podcasts. We have the Arsenal Pass podcast, Podcana, a Disney Lorcana podcast, as well as SNAPshot podcast, a Marvel Snap podcast, and he is also a commentator and caster for a lot of these card games. Brendan, thank you for joining us today. How are you doing, sir?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Thank you for having me. I'm in a bit of a situation. I mean, I'm moving apartments on Friday, which has taught me a lesson about the mistakes I've made in card games actually up until now, because I have 10 boxes of bulk, and I think I will never buy another sealed product ever again.
Buy singles.
It is disgusting. Like, it's honestly, these cards, like, they just have power over me at this point with all this clutter. It's too much.
Well, it's funny. So, I moved. Me and my family moved. When was like last year? It was about a year and a half ago. And I had to call Jim to hold, because I have like all of our card stuff. So I'm like, Jim, I'm gonna need you to hold on to all this stuff while we move.
It was a lot.
It was a lot. I think you had to do multiple trips. You had to take multiple trips.
Yeah, it filled my entire car and then some.
Yeah. Yep.
I think it's a bit daunting when I realize that the next apartment I move to, that 10% of my square footage is taken up by cards. Like,
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Well, it depends on who you talk to. Depends on
good.
who you talk to. We'll say if that's good or not.
Me. Talk to me. That's pretty good.
So, all right. Well, Brendan, the first thing I want to talk about is I'm curious as to kind of your history in the card game space. Talking a little bit before the call, come to find out, Flesh and Blood is the first card game that you really played. So I was wondering if you could kind of touch on kind of your history in the space a little bit.
Yeah, so it was the first card game I played, like you said, but I had I played video games before, and I played them a bit degenerately, I guess. I played a lot of World of Warcraft, which is probably
nice.
Common, right? But I ended up getting into like that, I was playing like 10, 15 hours a day. I was doing nowadays it's pretty interesting because right when I got out was when esports got into World of Warcraft. Mm-hmm. So it was like early Battle for Azeroth, but during the first expansion, the first raid of that expansion and prior, I was doing some of the Race to World First stuff. I wasn't in Limit, which is like the big US guild right now that a lot of people probably know that brand. But I was in, kind of top 5 US, and I was sort of on my progression path to try to get into Limit. I was in a guild called Alacrity, which was like a big feeder guild for Limit at the time. And then, I realized it's hard to keep up with that lifestyle. So I got out sort of right when esports got in, which is kind of a bummer, but ultimately probably for the best. But I got into card games because, me and my girlfriend actually got me into Magic, and I started buying dual decks, and then I bought every freaking dual deck there was, and I was just like a dual deck champion, aficionado. And pretty soon after that, Flesh and Blood dropped. I was in a local game store, and I just saw it, and I just impulse bought it. Went home, opened up some booster box, loved the game, and I just kind of got addicted to it. They had a 10K tournament, which didn't make any freaking sense. Like, nobody heard about the game, nobody knew what was going on. So I drove down to Austin, Texas, a couple hours, and competed in my first tournament. Met my best friend, Sasha Markovic, met James White, creator of the game, and it just snowballed from there, to be honest.
Wow. That was the first Flesh and Blood tournament that you participated in?
Yeah, I got second. Unfortunately, I lost to Sasha.
He scrubbed out.
Yeah, pretty much. The inside scoop is I actually lost to basically a rules mistake, and honestly, Sasha kind of angle shooted me.
Wow.
Kind of angle shot me for the win, but it's all good. At that point, we split the finals in terms of prizing, and I used that money to roll that into the first constructed calling in New Zealand, and did like a 2-week trip out there, which was, talk about just an incredible experience. With my first exposure to card games is like, it takes me to a place in the world that I probably would have never gone to. One of the most amazing trips I've been on, and the people I met, they are part of my life even today, with Arsenal Pass being a weekly thing, and just some of my best friends are a part of that Flesh and Blood community. It was a crazy thing.
Yeah. Awesome. One thing we talk about a lot in in this podcast and kind of everything that we're doing is all about the community. And I love hearing stories just like that, where, going to New Zealand, like you hit it on the head, right? Never would have thought that you would have gone there in any other way, and then somehow you made your way to New Zealand.
Yeah, honestly, even more recently, Pro Tour number 2 was in France. It was in Lille, which is Lille's an interesting spot in France. I'll say that. It was a weird place to pick for a Pro Tour, but I did do 5 weeks in Europe, which is like, it was ridiculous. I was in sort of a life situation where I could take that time off, but card games facilitated that happening, and it was one of the most incredible experiences of my life. And I met people in each place from Flesh and Blood, which is freaking crazy.
That is cool. That is really cool. I love hearing stories like that. Hearing things like that, like, honestly solidifies in my mind that community is like it's the end all be all. Because and that's what I hear from everybody. A lot of times I hear is, it's not so much, I'm having a good time playing this game. This game is fun. That is the facilitator, right? The game is the facilitator for all these amazing experiences and these people that I'm meeting that I wouldn't have met any other way. And some of them now are some of my best friends, right? So that's awesome. Now,
I just want to say, because it actually, like, I agree with you, and it was cool because it wasn't my motivation for starting the game whatsoever. Like, I wasn't looking for that at all. But I think as I've matured and as I sort of grew into Flesh and Blood, I realized that was actually the sole reason why I kept playing the game. And honestly, what's motivated me to stay with it, and probably will stay with it for as long as I can, because it's part of my identity. It's part of who I am at this point. It's the people.
So that's what keeps you in now. But what was it that initially got you into it? Like, why did you pick it up in the first place?
I just liked the competition. I think, like, I felt like I was basically, I picked it up. I was playing it on my kitchen table. I was like, oh, I think I'm pretty good at this game. And
like everyone else does.
Exactly. And this is kind of the story of the first tournament too, is like, we had this local scene that was like me, my girlfriend, and like some 15-year-olds. And like, we had to like bribe them with promos to keep coming out. But yeah, in lead up to that first tournament, I remember I'd been winning a lot. I was like 27-0, and I'm like, dude, I got this. And first game I get down in Austin was against my friend Sasha, and I lose. And I'm like, ooh, this is not going to go well. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I picked it up really early. I was like, man, I think I'm pretty good at this. I'll go give a shot at the 10K. And I didn't, like, nothing attracted me to like the physical cards or playing in person or making friends. I was just like, I'm going to go try to do this. And yeah, my motivations nowadays are literally the complete opposite.
Yeah. So you mentioned video games and World of Warcraft. I mean, it's crazy to me that, you know, you pick up Flesh and Blood, immediately become an amateur professional Flesh and Blood player. But you know, you talk about the video games. What similarities do you see between World of Warcraft and card games in general, or maybe particularly Flesh and Blood?
So I think that this aspect can be mirrored in a lot of different things, right? And that's that Flesh and Blood and World of Warcraft have something in common. That's like, there's an input to output ratio in terms of like what you put into it is sort of what you get out in terms of reward. And I felt like that was a very rewarding experience. It was something that I could obsess over and I could throw myself into and become absorbed in. And there was enough depth that I couldn't reach the bottom, right? And I could really put my time into it, and then it translated to an output, to an outcome, and I felt rewarded. And I think that that's what a lot of games should strive. Like, a lot of games strive to give that experience, but not a lot have it, right? And I think that's what can make something, you know, like a World of Warcraft or like a Flesh and Blood, something that you can really sink your sort of, I don't know, all of you into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people say a lot of, sink your teeth into, but I think that explanation is exactly what they're referring to, is that input to output ratio. Yeah. Are there any other games, and you know, we'll definitely be touching on Marvel Snap and, you know, Disney Lorcana here in a little bit, but are there any other games right now that you see that similar input to output ratio in, that you are being rewarded with?
Yeah, so I don't really play video games anymore, just because they don't mesh well with like a more adult lifestyle, you know, having responsibility.
Shots fired, guys.
That being said, this past weekend was the Diablo 4 beta. And so I probably played that over 3 days. I probably played that for like maybe 35 to 40 hours. And then this next weekend,
my man,
there's another beta. There's another open beta. So all week I've been getting together 3 more of my friends, and we're going to go for a hardcore Ashava kill, which is like the world boss. It's like the only aspirational content in the game. So yeah, I mean, been theory crafting like all week, and yeah, I don't know. Still, I can't stay away from it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you just said it's the theory crafting is how big to you is theory crafting? Because Jim talks about theory crafting all the time, especially in regards to card games, but also World of Warcraft. Like, how much? I guess I should phrase it from the standpoint of how much impact do you put on theory crafting? And like, if a game doesn't have some sort of theory crafting, do you see yourself getting more or anything out of that game if you can't craft something for yourself?
Yeah, it's a really tough question, because I know it's an issue with a lot of like modern games. I feel like is like they try to make it so accessible that it becomes too easy and it eventually lacks depth. And I think that, like, when I think of theory crafting, honestly, the best sort of expression experience of that for me has been Flesh and Blood, and getting together with groups of players, groups of my friends, and testing for months on end, and then creating like systems in terms of like how we collect and aggregate and analyze our data, creating schedules, sort of like having sort of like a macro and micro dive on sort of our individual games, having a strategy for the team, but also the individual player, and then taking that to this this sort of culminating event somewhere in the world, whether it's Pro Tour in France or Pro Tour in New York, and then putting that to the test. Something about that process is both miserable, painful, fun, awesome, and just like very rewarding in the end, whether you win or lose.
Yeah. Now, so we had Flake on, right? You know what? Since we're talking about Flake, I've got one question I want to ask you. Why would you start a podcast around Disney Lorcana with a guy like Matt DeMarco? Why would you do that to yourself?
Honestly, he was the only one who
know how to play
offered
the game. We don't even know what the game is.
Yeah. So honestly, that's the whole Podcana thing is pretty interesting because there's a balance between getting ahead of something and also like I've seen other podcasts for other games try to get ahead of something too early, right? And then they're doing weekly content, they run out of content, and they actually just kind of fatigue their own audience. And Podcana is like a huge balance for me and Flake in doing that. And it's kind of the reason why we're on bi-weekly right now. And we're like, Ravensburger, release the rules. Please. But I think that Lorcana as a card game is set up to be successful. And if you look at the products that they've showcased so far, the company behind it, not being Disney, but Ravensburger, it's set up to be successful. And I think at the very least, it'll just be enjoyable for me. And I think I'm at the stage where I've realized that like I guess we can talk about this when we get into casting, but I've realized what I have to do to maximize my sort of sustainability and enjoyment in the things that I like. And podcasting allows me to do that in things like card games. So in Flesh and Blood, in potentially Lorcana, and in things like Marvel Snap, they give me a way to sort of, sustainably interact with that game. So I don't have to be a professional player. I don't have to be trying to degen to be the best, right? I can just be having conversations with my friends, which is like very self-actualizing. It's great. And that's why we do it, and community, et cetera, et cetera. But I can keep engaging with that game that I love.
So going off of that, is there one thing that's more important to you when we talk about, because you just talked about sustainability in the game, like long-term or even the short-term, or enjoyment? I mean, I think, in a perfect world, we want both, right? But do you look for, like, if you're looking to pick something up, like, let's just talk about Lorcana, for instance, okay? Do you look more at, is it more important to you that you're going to enjoy it, or if it's something that's going to be sustainable in the longer run? Because, I mean, a lot of us do things that we don't like, but we know it's a sustainable source of income for whatever reason, right? Let's talk about income, right? But when it comes to card games, do you look for, like, is it more important to you that it's enjoyable, or that it's going to be sustainable or successful in the long term?
Yeah, I think it's multifaceted. I think enjoyment is definitely one of the key motivators, but I think approached with sort of the mindset that you can't enjoy everything all the time, every time. Sometimes it's not going to be, you'll get burnt out. It won't always be exciting. It won't always be new. It won't always be fun. And I realize that, but I do know, like, I can still extract enjoyment out of that card game. And then on top of that is sustainability. Like if it's just, Lorcana is being launched by a sort of a massive publisher, great IP backing, and everything has looked good so far. So from what I can tell, it's going to exist for a while, and I can invest my time and energy into it now, and I can reap the rewards of that later, whether it's, being able to travel to Lorcana events, being able to create a community around it, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it just sort of, it lowers the risk of me just, talking into space and wasting my time potentially. I think it's multifaceted, but I do think that, both Flake and I have approached Lorcana primarily because we're like, wow, this game looks sweet.
Yeah. Well, one thing when we talk to Flake, one thing that I remember telling him, I'm like, it is a very good opportunity, like for any card game content creator. I was talking to Jim about this when it was announced. I know we felt like, man, we are in this space at a really opportune time, and it's a very good opportunity for people like us to, essentially jump on the bandwagon, right? And those I feel like those times don't come around very often, right? I mean, Flesh and Blood was another big one, right? That, but I feel like just these times don't come along very often. So I do feel fortunate to be in this space at this time for sure. Is there one thing above all else that intrigues you about Lorcana, or not? Like, is there one thing that's kind of pulling you to it, or is it just kind of a multifaceted thing?
Yeah, I think it's multifaceted. I can't really say. I think if I said there was one thing pulling me to it right now, like it wouldn't be 100. Like it just wouldn't be fair, right? Because we don't have the rules, we don't have the gameplays. Like the fact of the matter is, you just don't know. So I think that it's just the potential that really drives me to it. It's just like I sort of believe in the publisher, looking at their history, looking at their designers. It's like they have everything they need to make a good game here. They have the huge IP backing, everything. Like this can be huge. So I'm just going to give it a shot, right? I can't say that I'm like, there's this one thing about this game that differentiates from others, and that's why I'm going to play it, because ultimately right now we don't know.
Right.
It's just the money cards for me. That's it. Just going to make great money off of it, and I don't even know how to play the game. I'm not going to learn how to play the game. Yeah. All right.
We talked about that in our podcast today, actually. Well, not necessarily money cards, but if you look based off of like some of the rumors Flake and I have heard from our friends that have stores, is like the allocation is not looking up to be what people expect. And we really felt this in Flesh and Blood and some of the earlier sets, and you can see the same patterns happening, like early pre-orders going out of like, some unknown stores in Canada. And it's like, are they going to uphold those pre-orders 6 months later after they've kept your money on a 0 interest loan, and they can now sell it for 1,000 rather than 100? It's like, it doesn't happen. And we talked about it a bit on this week's podcast, because in Flesh and Blood, a lot of people got wrecked because of that, this whole craziness of an alpha set.
Do you see the first set for Lorcana shaking out similarly to how Flesh and Blood did? I mean, I feel like that's a good bet to make. But it's just, with the allocations that we're hearing about, all the news that's coming out, it just seems like there's flags that are going up that just are very similar to what happened with Flesh and Blood. What do you think it's going to shake out in a similar fashion?
So I think yes and no. I would say no, because for Legend Story Studios, they come out, they release their alpha product. There's sort of a risk assessment they need to make in terms of how much product they print. They have no idea what the demand is going to be, and whatever they print, they print. And like, they've decided that beforehand. They have limited amount of capital, et cetera, and that demand might wildly exceed or be under whatever the market demand is. Lorcana, not the same thing whatsoever. Ravensburger also has the capital to theoretically print as much as possible. The real bottlenecks come in them actually getting space to print, because I know that's a huge issue. Multiple games have had multiple sets delayed, have not been able to get as much printing as they want. It really affected Flesh and Blood, so that's a big issue. I also think when it comes to local game store allocations, like we know Lorcana is going to be in big stores, right? Like Walmart, it might be on like a SCG, it might be on a Channel Fireball, who knows? So even if your local game store is getting a bad allocation, which is that's what we've heard behind the scenes, they could be massive allocations to things like those big box stores, and there could still be enough product. I think if Ravensburger goes into this not printing as much as they humanly possible can, because remember, at the same time, for them, the more they print, the more money they make, right? If they actually believe the demand will be there, and the demand looks like it's going to be there. Yeah. So if they don't do that, I think that it's just like it seems like it would be a huge strategic mistake, so much so that there's almost no way. I think it's got to be a bottleneck in terms of like actually getting space to print those kind of cards, or they are allocating other places than local game stores in terms of like the bulk of their product.
One thing that we've talked about multiple times is when it comes to printing, the idea has been thrown out about Ravensburger coming out and being transparent with the fact that they're going to print as much as humanly possible. Do you think if they were to come out and publicly say something like that, that would have a positive impact either on pricing allocations or whatever you have? Because I know one thing that's been talked about quite a lot is collectors, investors trying to buy up as much product as they can, to sell off at a future point to just, make as much money as they possibly can. Do you think Ravensburger coming out and publicly saying something like that would be good, number one? And do you think they would do something like that?
So I think if they use like an ambiguous term, like we're going to print as much as humanly possible, it would have almost no effect. And I think if they used a specific term and a specific number, it would probably have the opposite of the intended effect. And I think that collectors, or not collectors, but speculators would actually have less risk investing in the product and trying to scalp it rather than they would when the number is actually ambiguous. So I almost feel like there's nothing that Ravensburger can do in terms of like informing the public. But yeah, it is going to have what I think if people don't believe or understand that Lorcana is going to be absolutely dominated by scalpers in the secondary market, like that's just how it's that's just how it's going to be. And it's like people were complaining about the MSRP of $146. Now that's the best price. That's not the price anybody here is going to pay. I'll tell you that.
Now that was for a booster box, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did we just assume that based off of the pack price? Is that kind of how we got to that essentially?
Yeah, I believe it was off the pack price. And I think the US price was, I don't know how Flake got it. I don't know if it was leaked or was given by a store, but I know we had the UK prices the last week. So yeah, it looks like it's going to be around $140, but I really don't see any sort of week one boxes being at that price. I just really hope it stays in that 2 to 3x range, which is disgusting. Don't get me wrong, but like when it gets to like 10x, it's too much.
Yeah. How well? Okay, so let's.
It's not if, it's when.
Well, what do you think? What do you think a box price is going to be at a random LGS? If you had to throw out a number, what would you guess?
Oh, it's tough. So I'll just look at just like thinking back to Flesh and Blood, and in terms of like Crucible of War is like a heavily scalped set. I mean, we were looking at like 500 plus a box. I know there was a set that came after that, which was Monarch, which is funny because there was a large online retailer that the publisher did a deal with, and they heavily manipulated the market. But there was a big meme called Mon to 1K, and people were looking for $1,000 boxes, and I think that's not super far out. The one thing that might keep the price of this box down is like the macroeconomic market conditions of just the general economy here in the West is not great for TCG speculation right now. I think that if you're YOLOing out your life savings into like a new card game where you don't know the printing and you have we have no details on it that's a bit less likely than if you go back, a year and a half or 2 years ago when people were doing it in Flesh and Blood. I don't know. I think that the sort of deployment of capital back then was a bit more reasonable, where now it's like, I think if people are doing it, they're probably big players rather than just like, the dude down the street's buying like 20 Mon boxes and he's going to give him the 1K.
Right. Well, do you think there's anything that can be done about that? Like, do you think that's ever going to go away, or do you think that's just the nature of the market and the marketplace?
Yeah. I mean, so if they print enough, then it should equalize at map, right? Theoretically, I think that through the big box retailers, as much as that experience is actually not going to benefit me, you, or anybody probably listening to this, is like I'm talking about the packs and like Walmart and stuff, because people are going to go stand out front and get them anyway. That is a more accessible way, in my opinion, to get the product than through potentially like your local game store, which is, the local game stores, they not only do they add their price onto it, but that stuff gets sold out, and that stuff can get sold out to other scalpers as well. So it all comes down to like, so the distributors also, we talked with on the pod, but like when it comes to like the distributors and the local game stores, from what I understand, like let's say a distributor has 3 customers, right? 3 local game stores. One wants 1,000 boxes, one wants 100 boxes, and the other wants 100 boxes. They cut all of let's say that what they were expecting gets cut in half. Instead of allocating it all equally to all 3, they might just allocate it all to the big guy, all to number 1, and then just kind of screw over the smaller stores. It doesn't get when the allocations get cut, it doesn't get distributed evenly across the people that are expecting the boxes. It usually just kind of reallocates to the big guy, because that's where the relationships are, and that's where sort of the economies of scale of like the large ordering, maybe like the pre-orders, like all this kind of stuff. It just that's what happened in Flesh and Blood, at least.
Right. Now, so you're familiar with Team Covenant, right? Zach and Steven.
No.
So we're big fans of those guys. We
stole their setup.
Yeah, pretty much did. You're not wrong. So I know Zach is big into Flesh and Blood. Well, I know they both are. But we had talked to Steven a while back. But one thing that they've talked quite a bit about, and one of their core values, right, is they're not going to raise prices, right? They want to sell. They value their community too much, right? To do something like that. So I look at them, okay, as a model, and say, if everyone was like that, like if every store was like that, then would we have problems like this, right? So part of me thinks those problems would still exist, even if all LGSs had that similar mindset. Do you think if everyone was like Team Covenant and didn't raise their prices, if the market essentially validated that they do that, do you think the market would still be like that?
Yeah. So if I was going to be cynical, I would say it might work for everybody else if they were also a subscription model. So it really plays to Team Covenant's strengths that they don't do those kind of things, because they have a loyal customer base that's built on a continuity basis. And that means that people are paying for products sometimes that, maybe they didn't want the most recent Flesh and Blood set, but they're sort of a recurring customer of Team Covenant. They're big fans of the brand. They like the promo cards. Like, there's so much else that goes into it rather than just getting your box and getting at the lowest price possible, which is people shopping at LGSs. If there's 3 LGSs 10 miles away from each other, they're probably going to the cheapest one unless they have a relationship with like playing at that store or something like that. So I also like Team Covenant's mission and the way that they sort of they have a lot of integrity with their price, and they have a lot of loyalty to their customer base. I think it works out in their favor. First of all, that is just their business ethics. They're going to follow that whether it's profitable or not. But because it's a subscription model, it just makes sense. It wouldn't make sense to do it the other way, in my opinion. So I think that like that is sort of the only viable business decision for them if they want to maintain this long-term brand, this long-term customer base. But yeah, and do I think it would solve it if everybody went to that model? Maybe. So the thing is like, okay, let's say the LGSs didn't scalp it, right? Like, it's still going to be me. Like, say I'm the guy, right? It's still going to be me, the player. I'll be on the phone and it'll be like, hey, how much are your pre-orders? Like $100. It's like, okay, give me as much as possible and I'll scalp it. And like, it's just like, it's going to happen somewhere down the line. The opportunity's there.
Right. Do you think that's ever going to go away, especially in this space?
No, definitely not. Right. It's just, I just don't think so, because maybe if it becomes, well, honestly, it'll go away if it becomes not profitable anymore. That's it. Right. Yeah. That's really what it comes down to. The problem is that it is profitable. And people have been doing this not only in card games, but other assets of sort of e-commerce and online products for a long time. And as long as it's profitable, I think that people will do it.
I think I know how to fix it.
Oh boy.
Get rid of all physical card games, make it all digital. You can't have scalpers anymore, dude.
All right, before we get there, because that was a perfect segue, but I wish you would have waited.
I'm sorry, I just saw the opportunity.
There you go. So, but before we get there, this is very interesting talking about Lorcana, because again, like we talked about, the opportunity of being in this community at this time. Price is a huge thing that if you go to Lorcana HQ Discord, that's all people are talking about. Like when they announced pricing, it was a huge, like that was the topic. And a lot of unhappy people, for the most part, a lot of people were just not happy with the price, which again, you have to pay more for something. You don't I get it. Understandable. Yeah. But it's just, I don't think that's ever going to go away. it is just not, especially in this kind of space. It would that work, right? So let's talk about digital card games and physical card games. Do you think we'd ever get to a point where physical card games are going to become a thing in the past?
So I think the physical card games offer an experience that's not available in digital card games, and I think that I think that that's not a experience that's unique to me, and people have shown that that is a sort of universal experience, and that it's different, and that it matters, right? That's why people people will jump through hoops. People will play bad card games to play card games in person and to experience that in person feel in the community, et cetera, et cetera. Like a lot of I would say the digital card games pretty much across the board don't sort of don't they don't that's not available if you're playing digital card games. But nevertheless, okay, let's say we put on our tinfoil hats, we zoomed 10, 20 years into the future. I do think that printing these cards on cardboard in the current way we consume them is probably going to be archaic, right? And there's no reason why a game can't be both digital and physical simultaneously. So you can have the ease of access and sort of the low barrier to entry that a digital card game offers, but still somehow maintain that in-person tournament feel and that community that you get from a physical card game. I think they actually both work together very, very well. I just think that for some reason right now, these games always tend to sort of be one or the other.
Who do you think does so? One of the things you talked about there was it's the community. Every conversation that we have in this regard, everything always comes back to community. And I anytime I get the opportunity to point that out, I do that, right? Because that is the reason we started Hobbies and Happiness. That's why we're here, right? We're having this conversation around a table, right? Who do you think does it better, right? From the standpoint of building the community. Who does it better, and who's the onus on? Is the onus on the publisher or the developer of a game to help facilitate and create that community, or is that on the community themselves to try and facilitate that?
I think that the onus is on the publisher to at least help facilitate and make sure that the tools are available and that there are no systems that prevent that from happening that are in the game. But at the same time, I don't think that it can ever be successful or will even exist for that matter if it's solely created by the publisher. I think that it is a grassroots community initiative, and that's the only way that it can even exist.
Who are some publishers that have done it really well? Or games?
Yeah, I think that Legendary Studios did it really well. I mean, basically, it was part of their marketing, kind of their marketing gig, right? Like Magic got their Pro Tour and Flesh and Blood brought back, and play Flesh and Blood, travel the world.
Right.
But this rigorous organized play program, it's not cheap. It's really tough to pull off, and they did it. They went for it, and I think that they did it relatively successfully. And I think that that is what has facilitated the Flesh and Blood community is the organized play, in my opinion. I think that it's really important to have aspirational content in games. It's important to have Pro Tours. It's important to have Worlds. It's important to have something that players can, if they sink their time into it, they can be rewarded by competing or achieving or beating this thing. If that doesn't exist, then games are, in my opinion, mostly like pure hedonism, right? They're just there for the enjoyment. So as soon as your game is not enjoyable, people stop playing it. I want a reason to play your game when it's not fun.
Yeah. That's kind of the same thing that Tan and Grace. Okay, it's Charmer, not Tan and Grace. I'm sorry, I always get them confused, man.
I thought it was the same person.
We'll get to him in a second. We talked about the carrot and the stick, right? Give me that carrot, give me that reason to play your game. One of the reasons I never played Artifact. Did you play Artifact at all?
Nope.
Okay,
way before my time.
Okay, so I guess one of the reasons Artifact failed was, I guess one of the many reasons, it didn't give you a reason to play the game. One of the things I think Marvel Snap does a really good job at is giving you a reason to play. I'll log in for the day, create a couple, finish a few of the daily missions, get my in-game currencies, and then I played the game all 15 minutes today, and I maxed out everything that I'm able to max out for the day. And even if I didn't have fun or it was not enjoyable, I was still able to collect something in game. And for the most part, I'm having a lot of fun with Marvel Snap. But you know, you hit it on the head. Like, would you agree that stuff like that is very important to the overall success of a game?
So I think it's important to delineate between the carrot on the stick and aspirational content, because I think that Marvel Snap does carrot on the stick really well. They give you great reasons to log in. They reward you consistently for your efforts, and there's a recurring theme that makes you want to keep coming back. But Marvel Snap is actually one of the worst games, in my opinion, when it comes to aspirational content, because once you hit the max rank, once you hit infinite, the game actually gets worse, a lot worse, because first of all, the MMR, like the whole hidden MMR system and the matchmaking system breaks down, so you can end up into like this bot elo. There is no post infinite system right now. Like, there's nothing to do. There's no reason to play. There's nothing to do.
Gotcha.
So like what the vast majority of players in Marvel Snap do that are, you know, grinding or achieving the highest rank or, you know, whatever, they hit infinite and they stop playing for the month. And that's a terrible system. They're actually fixing it on this next patch, or trying to fix it. They're adding a leaderboard, adding like a skill-based rating, and then they're adding this conquest mode, which is like the battle mode, but now that's its own rank system.
So you get to do it all over again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's going to be a lot. That game exhausts me.
Now, how... So I was going to phrase the question like, how important is that? But let's talk about that in the context of digital card games and physical card games. Digital card games have a huge leg up over physical card games when it comes to stuff like that. Like, they can figure all that stuff out kind of on the fly, and they'll be like, all right, well, that's in the next patch that's going to be live next week, and then you'll have immediate access to it. Whereas physical card games, when do you do that? All right, so we announced our BNR, and then the next tournament you're going to play in, that's in a month, and then you'll be able to see it. I mean, can you talk about like how important that kind of stuff is in digital over physical, and like how can physical card games kind of essentially keep up with that kind of advantage that digital card games have?
Well, I think it's a testament to how important playing cards in person and that experience alone is, because I think that almost in every way, physical card games are way worse than digital card games. They're bad in terms of content. There's nothing to do on a day-to-day basis. And I think that they're actually pretty freaking hard to play, right? You need another human being. It's like, how do you... Like, digital card games solve a lot of problems that physical card games have. It's this weird thing where digital card games fixed, I would say, almost all the problems, but then they lost the essence, right? They lost what made it special, and they can't get it. They can't get it back. But I think it's really important for the digital card game specifically. And I think the way Marvel Snap does it is really, really good. Like, I think Marvel Snap content is amazing not in terms of the daily stuff, but the fact that we get a new card released every week, we get a new season pass every month, is like, I would love to find a reason to not log into that game, but I can't. Like, sometimes it feels like a freaking job.
Out of spite. Log in. Yeah. Don't log in out of spite.
In terms of like, so Marvel Snap is funny because in terms of the monthly reset of the rank is like, now they're adding conquest mode, is like this, the infinite rank grind, because I'm not in bot elo, so I play only people from 70 to 100, and it's tough. Like, it's a grind for me, and like, I don't know, when they add conquest mode, it's just gonna double up my grind, and I just I can't stop doing it. It takes up the first week of my month every month.
Well, are you enjoying? Like, do you enjoy it?
Understood. The silence says it all, guys.
Tough question, right? Tough question.
I mean, it's just, and it goes to what we were talking about, right? Like the whole sustainability versus enjoyable thing. Like, it's like, I was lecturing my son this morning. My son's not feeling well. We've got to give him some medicine. He does not like taking this medicine. So yeah, put two and two together. You figure out how that went. Okay. So I'm trying to explain to him. I'm like, Nolan, there's some times in life where we have to do things we don't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't want to take the medicine because he doesn't like how it tastes. I'm like, Nolan,
Welcome to the real world.
Exactly. I'm like, I have to go to a job that I don't necessarily want to go to, but I have to go to the job so I can get paid and pay for your medicine and pay for your food and provide for you, right? Like,
He's like, don't pay for my medicine. It's bad.
solve that problem, right?
Fixed.
But like, I don't want, and I think as content creators, and you know, if we're playing a card game, like I don't want that. I don't think any of us want it to become that feeling, right? We at some point we hope we have a fun time and it's enjoyable all the time. But I mean, the reality situation, it's not always enjoyable.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
mean-
not. It's really honestly. So the thing is like, do I enjoy grinding from 70 to 100 every single month and going through an experience that some other players doing that same grind don't? Because the matchmaking system is currently broken. So sometimes some people will play more bots, some people play less bots, some people play only bots, and play no bots. So it can be arbitrarily harder for some people and arbitrarily easy for some people, and nobody likes it. Both ends of the spectrum don't like it. People don't like playing only bots, people don't like playing only people because it feels unfair. Do I enjoy doing it? Honestly, it's a little bit stressful, but I enjoy my podcast, I enjoy being good at the game, and I enjoy understanding the game, and that grind makes me understand the game. And like we talk about doing things we don't want to do, you know, you're in a weird place in life when you're doing something you don't want to do and it's a video game. Like my girlfriend, so I'll get frustrated and stressed, and you know, because like I'm just really trying to get it over, like, you know, get it done for the month. She's like, "Why don't you just stop playing?" I was like, I just can't put into words.
That's a good point, though.
It's like the whole thing of I've been playing a game all day. I've been getting destroyed for the last 8 hours. For some reason, I can just not put it down. I will play that one more game so I'm not on tilt. Except then you go on that losing spree again, and you're even more upset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Since we're on the topic of Marvel Snap, one of the questions I asked Jim a while ago, because have you even played
I still
the game
haven't.
yet?
I thought we were going to do something.
So yeah, we're trying to. So one of the questions I asked him was, I explained how the whole collection system works, and I know with this most recent patch, they added this: you get a free Series 3 card every month. I have mixed feelings about that, but as a card game player, what was your initial take on a system where that didn't let you collect the cards you wanted to collect how you would normally collect them?
So I think that the system is so fundamentally wrong that when they say that they think that the unique collections are a feature of the game, it's a lie. Like, I think that they're being disingenuous, and I think that they know that there is almost no card gamer out there that wants to play a card game and not have access to the cards. There is nothing that feels good about playing against a player and losing to a card that you simply can't acquire. And when the only way you can acquire that is through your wallet in a reasonable amount of time, it feels bad. And Marvel Snap tries to signal to us that this is a feature of the game. This is a good thing.
It's a feature, not a bug.
Yeah, it sucks. Everything about it is bad. Everything about it is bad. And Marvel Snap is one of the most disgusting and just prohibitively expensive predatory games that has ever existed. I will happily say that.
More than Diablo Immortal? Holy cow.
Way more.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
More than Genshin Impact, more than gacha games, more than anything that I've ever put my hands on. But I think they created the best card game that has ever existed. Period.
Isn't it interesting how those two thoughts coincide around the exact same game?
Wow.
That's crazy.
I can't wait to play this game. And then not be able to use the cards I want, and then like really hate this game but still like the game.
You can play under my account and then still not have access to the cards I want to have access to.
Yeah, okay.
Let me ask you a question. If you were to start playing, if you picked it up right now, and you're how much money do you think you'd have to put in to get a full collection? Just ballpark it. What do you think that the expense is to acquire all the cards?
If it's less than 100,000, it's not as bad as Diablo Immortal.
100,000. Well, it's over 1,000. I think it's under 3,000 maybe, but it's also time gated. It's terrible.
Okay.
It's so much money.
Where did that
5K roughly to get everything, but still time.
I would say it's more like 2. It's probably more like 2, but it's going to be time gated
for everything. No, that's not that bad.
Well,
That's pretty,
where
that's pretty bad.
Oh, I'm thinking like modern. I'm like, I'll drop $2,000 to have everything on modern. Like,
modern.
sign me up.
modern. But hang on, where did that value come from? I'm curious as to where that number came from.
Personal.
Do you know?
Yeah, my personal bank account, unfortunately.
Personal bank account.
My personal
Okay.
bank account.
Okay.
Understood.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the difference between modern, so like, yes, Magic, but you also get to keep the cards, and then you can
Oh
sell
yeah,
those
you can
cards.
sell them.
I'll just sell the account. I don't care if that account gets banned because I'll already have the money. So it's whatever.
Okay, well, hang on. We brought up this conversation has gone so many different places, and I will tell you, like Brendan, this is a great conversation. I feel like this is the first conversation where I've just been picking up how this conversation's been going and not sticking to the script. This has been great. But we talk about modern. Now Jim has a question. We know we. Okay, Jim, just go. Just ask your question about Magic.
Right.
Okay.
So I know you don't have a whole lot of experience with Magic, but you still know a bit. So, and we're already like 50 minutes in roughly, so it's not going to really set how the rest of the conversation goes.
Because this is already a great conversation.
Yeah, it's already great. But in Magic, what is your favorite color and/or color combination?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because I think the color identities and what they do in Magic definitely change as you progress through the format, so the card pool expands. But unfortunately, or maybe fortunately for you, I think my favorite color is blue.
Yeah, it's fortunately for him.
Yeah,
My man.
and you probably pair that with white if you had to add a little thing on the side there.
Add a little bit more control. I get it. Yeah.
Now, I can't remember if you've said this or if Flake said this, but fun is a zero-sum game.
Yeah, well, I think Flake got that from me. It's
fun
is definitely fun is definitely zero sum. I also believe that it's finite, and I will be having all of it.
100%. I love playing control mirror matches.
Yeah,
so those are fun.
Yeah, in Flesh and Blood, there's definitely some decks, and some decks that I don't know. Some me and my testing group are known for that are. I mean, they are worse than Control Magic. They are very, very uninteractive. They don't prison people out, but like they don't play. The deck legitimately does not play Flesh and Blood. It does not play.
I'm very interested.
Yes,
yeah.
I'm interested too. Because so here's my question: like, how does control work with Flesh and Blood? Is it tied normally to a specific color, class, hero, or how does it typically work? Because with Magic, it's basically if you want to play control, you're running some form of blue some way.
Yeah, so I would say that Flesh and Blood, to an extent, doesn't have control. At least doesn't have the usual archetype of control. What it does have is attrition. So because Flesh and Blood is a game where the cards you attack with are also your resource cards, and there are no lands and things like that. It's like the card, like this version of control is usually attrition based, where you're running the opponent out of threats or even running out of cards completely. So fatigue. I think most executions of control in Flesh and Blood suck. They're not cool for anybody. Like they're terrible to play. They're just blocking. They're really, really boring for everybody. It's not fun like Magic, where you get so far ahead and the other person has to sit there and it's painful. Basically, they get to play their game, but then they just don't win at the end. There has been some good decks, some decent control decks in the past, but nowadays it's mostly based around fatigue, which is a really lame thing in Flesh and Blood. And then honestly, most of the quote unquote control decks are just like tempo mid-range decks, because there's a wizard hero called Icelander that is in the sort of control theme of ice, but also has like the most quantitatively, the highest quantitative expressed cards in terms of like value and also expressed attack value than any other class in the game. It can also play on instant speed of its arsenal. So it's hitting from all angles, and yeah, it's a great deck. You'd love it. You'd love it. People hate playing against it.
I'd love this deck. That's the only reason I need. People hate playing against this deck.
That is very much going to be up Jim's lane, 100%, absolutely. Okay, I want to bring this back to Lorcana for a little bit. There's a couple things I want to touch on. So we were talking about like organized play, and what was the term that you used? We talked about the carrot on the stick, but needing the needing to have
aspirational content, like sort of what would be in a video game. You would equate this to end game, right? This is end game, but in a card game. Like I need a pro tour, I need worlds. There has to be something, even if it's my LGS's monthly tournament. I need something that I can aspire to achieve.
What's the end game that you want to see for Lorcana?
Yeah, so it's tough because I don't think the game is, or at least the developers of the game are motivated to mimic a flesh and blood system, which would be a robust organized play system. But I do hope for, at the very least, we know they're going to be supporting local game stores, so there should be weekly play, stuff like that, whatever. But I hope that they at least have a world championship. I think that it makes sense. I think that, these big tournaments like world championships or pro tours, they're not plus EV on the direct bottom line for the company, but I think they work as great marketing tools, and they give people reasons to play the game for a long time, to get good at the game, and to really sink their time into it. So I hope for the very least, I hope for world championship.
If we have a world championship, where do you think that would be? Do you think that would be at Disney World?
The castle.
Surely it's at Disney World, right? It just makes so much sense.
How let down do you think everybody would be if they announce a world championship and it's not at Disney World?
Yeah, it's
at
in
Disneyland.
It's in a convention center in Baltimore or something. Yeah.
All right. So we talked about the end game for Lorcana. What's one thing that if you had to boil down one thing that you want to see come out of Lorcana, what would it be? Would it be that end game, or is there something else that you want to see come from the game of Lorcana?
Yeah, so honestly, it's the thing I'm most worried about Lorcana is I don't want a glorified board game, which I think a lot of card games are. It's kind of hard to figure out where the line is drawn. And I think it's drawn in terms of depth and complexity, but also in terms of like, I guess, where you can play it, like uniformity, right? Like, I can play this on my kitchen table, but can I also play the same kind of game, but with a different level of depth at a big tournament or at world championships, et cetera, et cetera. And I really don't want a glorified board game. I don't want a shallow, flat, sort of money grab-esque Disney IP piece of crap. Like, that would suck. That would really suck. That would be a huge disappointment. And honestly, there's some things about Lorcana that currently really worry me in terms of like them going that direction. Like, Ravensburger is a board game publisher, and there's a big difference between board games and card games. And honestly, the biggest one for me right now is like the damage counters. Dude, damage counters freaking suck. Persistent damage in card games is terrible. There's a reason why it exists in digital card games and not in physical card. If you've ever sat with a physical card game, and as you pass your turn, you're like, okay, tick up my counter on my 15 different things, readjust my life totals, you have 5 dice on your cards. Everything about that is freaking terrible. There's a reason why card games cut that out. And the fact that like Lorcana is including damage counters in these boxes, I'm just like, Ravensburger, like that's a very board game thing, is like damage counters. It's archaic. It doesn't, it's terrible. So
it's pretty rough on Pokemon still.
Yeah.
Like it's been a thing since it came out, and I play it every now and again in paper, and I'm just like, I have no room on my board. There's all this stuff. I'm not even enjoying myself, but on their digital client, it's pretty good.
Yeah. So one thing I talked to Flake a little bit about was when we first heard about this game, I was very cautious, right? Because it's from Ravensburger, and one of the things that Ravensburger, one of their games that I'm a fan of, I do like. We've got a lot of content around this game is Disney Villainous. Disney Villainous is a board game, but it's also a card game. I'd classify it as a card game. We would technically classify it as a card game, but most people would classify it as a board game. Are you familiar with Villainous at all? No,
honestly, I've not played many board games. I really struggle with not sort of, I play my turn. Now I sit there and wait for you to play your turn. You take that to 4. So like Commander Magic or anything like that. My attention span is, it's gone.
So you like the 1v1 stuff. You do not like multiplayer?
1v1 actually is already pushing the boundaries of my attention span. Like if it's not, we're talking like Marvel Snap, like just Zoomer level attention. Like it's bad.
All right, understood. So when we found out about this game, when we found out about Lorcana, when I heard it was Ravensburger, I was not happy at the moment because the way we viewed Villainous was we analyzed that game through the lens of a card gamer and a card game. It is not built like a traditional card game. So we've had many complaints about it because of that. So I gave it the benefit of the doubt and said, okay, we're evaluating this game from the mind of a card gamer, where it's not really trying to imitate or mimic an actual card game. So they're trying to build a board game. So I'm like, all right, I'll give them that. But now they're coming out with an actual card game. I was very hesitant and very nervous. So it's interesting you say that, because I had the exact same hesitancy. Okay. Now I'm very curious. You talk about card games and board games. What makes a card game in your opinion?
What makes a card game a card game? That's a hard question.
It is, I know.
I think if we talk about like what distinguishes it from a board game, is I think that generally they have more seamless and streamlined play, right? Like the dice thing, the counters, these lack sort of the independent turns, like stuff like that, I think is making its way out of at least modern card games. Like you look at Flesh and Blood, it is 100% persistent. There is no my turn, your turn. There is a turn cycle, and there is the active turn player, right? And Marvel Snap expands upon this, but yeah, I think the board games more keep that sort of lax kind of casual feel, where card games are a bit more high speed. It's just kind of funny to say, I guess.
Yeah. So do you think, and I know you guys have talked about this on Podcana, do you think it's going to be that shared turn cycle, or do you think it's going to be my turn, your turn?
That one I'm not sure about because of the creature combat. I think that there is definitely a my turn, your turn. Well, okay, to answer your question, there's definitely my turn, your turn, because there's like this untap step. I guess it could also be shared, but I do think that my question is less about like my turn, your turn, because Flesh and Blood technically has my turn, your turn. It's whether the opponent can actively interact on your turn, right? So making it this like pseudo simultaneous turn. Right. I think they will have that. I think the combat will be interactive. One of the people we had, Sasha Markovic, who's been doing a lot of theory crafting for the game, he thinks that it won't be, because it's more complicated. And I think that a lot of Sasha's theory crafting thesis comes off the basis of like, if they can simplify it, they will. And simultaneous turns, priority, I don't think there'll be priority and instant speed interaction, but for example, priority, instant speed interaction, simultaneous turns, all of that makes a card game more complicated. And I do think that Ravensburger is going for a more simplified game, although one thing that I'm really passionate about is I don't think the Disney IP is actually directed at children. I think it's directed at middle-aged men, because tell me about kids. Okay, so let's look at some of the cards in Lorcana, right?
Yes.
Robin Hood.
Robin Hood.
That's like 50
Robin
years
Hood.
old.
Robin Hood, Hades. Robin Hood and Hades.
Yeah.
Those characters are from VHS. No kid this day is watching Robin Hood or Hades. They're watching Mr. Beast put his hand on a car and so you can hold it on there long.
Yeah, those kids don't even know how to spell VHS either. Yeah. So
well, okay. What is the most recent IP that they featured on a card? Lilo and Stitch?
Elsa?
The most recent one was like, there was Tigger that came out, and then I can't remember the dude that looks like a shark because I haven't even seen the movie with him.
Oh, Gantu's from Lilo and Stitch.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm more saying the most recent film or most recent movie that the character would have appeared in. So I think that Elsa?
I think it's Frozen.
Elsa. Yeah, Elsa. Frozen.
Elsa was Frozen? Yeah. So
I think it's Mickey Mouse. I just learned about that character the other day.
The opposite. Just first learned about the character. Get out of here.
Okay, right. I'll stop.
But I think that IP is for us. I don't think it's for kids. But
that's...
I do think they will build a system that you can play with your kids because it's an approachable IP, which is a huge marketing sell for the game. I know a lot of people picking it up for that reason. But I remember I was having this like epiphany the other day. And I was like, dude, kids don't watch Disney movies. Like they watch shorts on YouTube. Like,
well, so it's funny because this exact conversation is one that has been had in at a lot of different Lorcana circles, right? I think the initial take was that this game is going to be directed at children and not middle-aged men, as you said. But there's a lot of people who disagree because, again, like you said, look at the IP. I for one, I'm looking forward to this to introduce my kids to card games because we're a big Disney family. I actually do watch Disney movies with my kids. We have Friday night movie nights. I've talked about this a lot. Every Friday night, we watch a movie as a family. We have pizza for dinner. I think we watch Hercules. One of the last ones we watched was Great Mouse Detective. So I'm introducing them to the older movies, the ones that I watched when I was a kid. So I'm getting them there, getting them exposed to those. But I think you're right. Like, I don't think if kids are not being exposed to these through their parents, then they're probably not just going to go out and watch them.
Yeah.
No.
What do you think?
It's still an approachable IP, right? Like it's still, it's still a good IP. And I think that, if it is directed at, like people like us, if we have kids, like if it is a simple enough game, it's going to be a great game. It's very approachable. It's not flesh and blood. Like it's not this, gory sort of just kind of dark setting and, complicated turns. Like it can be an introductory product and it could be, introductory for kids to get more exposed to that IP as well that haven't.
Do you think that's good for the marketplace, the TCG marketplace, to have a game like Flesh and Blood on the more strategic end, the more high-end side, and then have a game like, let's just say Lorcana is going to be on that opposite end, so you have that breadth, that breadth of strategic depth if you want it, or if you want a lighter game. Do you think that's important for a space?
Yeah, I think it is, and I think that there is a opportunity in the market, and I think that that's honestly, I don't know, I think that may be part of the reason for the inception of Lorcana. I think we're in a bit of a TCG bull market, I guess, and there's a bunch of TCGs getting created. Speaking about Team Covenant, I remember I was at Zach's house maybe like 6 months, year ago, and he was telling me, he was like, dude, a couple of years ago, the amount of new TCGs that would email us product and try out the game was so and so. Now it's like 100x. Apparently, there's so many freaking games.
That's crazy.
Early 2000s, Dan. We're back.
Well, and this is a question that I've asked a lot of people. Was I feel like we are in a TCG renaissance. Like I feel like we're back in that late 90s, early 2000s. So, I mean, it's pretty clear like that's what the market is saying.
Everyone and their mother is making a card game.
Well, here
we are. Yeah. It means there's going to be a lot of bad card games coming out too. A lot of card games that are going to come and then burn out quickly and flicker away.
Do you think we're going to see these more bad card games than we did in the early 90s, late 2000s? Or do you think a lot of people in the space have seen what's happened in the market, learned lessons from the games that have succeeded, and we're going to see more winners now? Or do you think it's still going to be, we're just going to see a ton of losers?
I still think we'll see a ton of losers because I do believe that the bar for what makes a good card game is a bit relative. And as the sort of collective levels up, if something falls below that base threshold of what people consider good, it's still a stinker. And I think that a lot of games, even if they are fundamentally good, they will just be unimaginative or a bit samey, or they just won't be able to compete with something that's just people see as better than it and will also just kind of be a stinker. But I don't think we're going to go back to like the absolute just craziness that was some of those older card games where they just like kind of don't work. Like I think that'll be less likely.
How long do you think before the big three is no more? So, the big three, at least in the West, it's been Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Magic for the longest time, have been the top three high-selling collectible games on the market. How long do you think it's going to be those three, or do you think that's going to expand, or do you think we're going to have a new big three, or how do you think that's going to play out?
Big four.
Yeah, it's tough because a lot of those games, they have a lot of history behind them, and that actually contributes a lot to their, I think, ongoing success. Like I think Magic is kind of I like Magic, but I think it's kind of a bad game. And I know everybody harks on the resource system, but a lot about Magic is like you wouldn't see that in modern card design. But Magic gives an experience that you can't get anywhere else, but it has a history that I don't think other card games like obviously they don't have. And what's really interesting about Magic to me is like there is so much that you can dig into with Magic. If you come in right now, there's so much content, history, and just card, like there's so much to do. And like they've had this sort of an audience that's grown with them for 20 plus years. And Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, they have this too. I don't know if we're going to replace the big three. In regards to expanding, I don't know either, because I can't remember the name, but there's some sort of theory that every sort of niche or a niche or a kind of market has room for a big three, and that's it. So like you think about like credit cards, it's Visa, MasterCard, Amex, right? And there's like a million other examples where it's always just like this big three, and people will use this for their sort of market entry thesis as in to create a business in an already saturated or monopolized market. Is like there's always room for three, right? DoorDash, Uber Eats, I don't know what the third is, but it's
Grubhub. Grubhub. Yeah, it is. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So there's always room for three. But I do think the other card games will still have a lot of success, and maybe one of those will fall out. But yeah, the big three. I think it's a good spot to be for those card games in terms of longevity. Because look at Magic; they can almost do no wrong. It feels like sometimes.
but they can. They can. Everyone will call them out on it, but they'll still buy product.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like they'll still give them their money, right? Mm-hmm. So first mover advantages are real. But one thing that one conversation we've had before with Joey Sinart, he talks a lot about emotional investment, like the emotional investment that people have invested into these card games. Like no company, no brand can come in and take that away. And that's one of the reasons that, people stay in Magic, we talk about there, because of that those emotions they have invested in that game.
It's the same thing when people were thinking every single new MMO that comes out is going to be the WoW killer. The only thing that's killing WoW is itself. Yeah. There's no other real way for any new game to come in and just be, oh, hey, yeah, we're instantly all better than World of Warcraft. No, it's not going to happen. Blizzard has to kill their own game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think we've seen it time and time again. I wonder what it will take for at least one of those to fall out of the big three and for something else to surpass it in terms of like an annual sales, or I don't know what you would quantify it off. If it is directly just off sales, or if it is like, player base, organized play, like the attendance, prize pool, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what you would quantify for something to actually break into that group and be the number three. But like you said, I think that they've got a really strong position where they are, and 100 new card games on the market next year isn't going to change that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do think Disney has one of the best shots in terms of coming out strong out of the gate, because with that whole emotional investment, they've already been here for like 100 years.
100 years.
So like no one, even these card games that have been out for close to 30 years, Dan, close to 30 years. Can't even come close to the 100 years that Disney has. And it's again, it's not newborn people that are being targeted for this game. It's the middle-aged people who have grown up with it for quite some time.
How would you sort of describe the dichotomy between a card game's mechanics, playability, and overall quality versus its intellectual property? Like, how important is IP, and can IP make a game on its own?
I don't think so.
There's no way.
I don't think an IP, and I had the same question thrown at Justin Gary. Justin Gary designed the Ascension deck building game. He's designed a lot of great games, but he built his own IPs. And I don't think an IP is a big enough sell on its own. And that's why right now I think Lorcana, the hype is real for Lorcana, for Disney Lorcana, because it's like you just talked about, that 100 years of IP. But the moment we get that gameplay, I think that's going to be the deciding factor of when we find out how this game actually works, you're going to see people fall off because they're like, I don't like how this game works, I'm out.
The IP really just gets people to start looking at it. Yeah. They're like, oh, this is cool. I'm a big fan of Disney.
Yep.
Okay, they check it out, and if they don't like it, well, then there's only so much the IP is going to do.
What do you think, Brendan?
I think it'll sell the first set. I don't think it'll keep people around, though. I think the game keeps people around. I do think there are bad games that have good IPs that have stuck around longer than I think they should have. But if I look at Marvel Snap, I think Marvel Snap has a categorically good IP. But for me, if I was going to talk about my personal experience, there is probably not a worse IP that Marvel Snap could have than Marvel. And this might come as sacrilege but I did not like Marvel. I didn't like anything about it. I didn't know anything about it. The reason I didn't like it was because of the cinema and the sort of the blitz of Marvel movies. And I was just like,
Right.
I don't like anything about. I actually avoided that game. I didn't try to get into the beta, nothing, because I was like, I just don't like Marvel, which is obviously very ignorant of me.
Right.
But when I finally picked up the game, I was like, I don't care what they put on these cards. This is a good game.
What made you keep playing? Like why did you come to that conclusion of this is a good game?
Yeah, so simultaneous turns, short turns, cutting out the boring parts of card games. It's a really interesting question, expanding on that, which is like, I think that what Marvel Snap did in terms of condensing card games is absolutely correct, and it's just better. But did they lose the essence of a card game in doing that? Because if I look at Marvel Snap and I look at Flesh and Blood, there's no reason why a card game should last 50 minutes, period. I think that you can condense the exciting moments, and it's just better. But we'll see over time if you lose the essence of what makes a card game special and what makes it good when you get down to that condensed model. But we have simultaneous turns. You have this sort of amazing we talk about the collection thing being crap, but it's only crap because they paywall so bad. It's actually really good. I love the collection sort of card acquisition thing with like upgrading cards and you know how in Hearthstone 2 where they had like, okay, you can get the gold card. It was like, that was such BS. That was such a scam. Like in Marvel Snap, you have like different variants. They introduce new artists all the time. Like they have bundles, in-game events, like all this stuff that is just so much better than the sort of the competition, but the core game system and the core game loop with the snap mechanic, with the we both play our turn at the same time, the game lasts 5 minutes. I just think it's the best. And the lane system too, like the lane system, the cards, the small decks, the low variants, so much about Marvel Snap I think is I actually think that they define their own genre, which is pretty unique. I think that they created a genre when they launched that game.
What's you talk about the essence of a card game. Well, what is the essence of a card game?
I have no idea. It's so like that's the thing.
It's so nebulous, right? Yeah.
Exactly. It's so nebulous, and I don't think we're gonna know until Marvel Snap just doesn't provide, like, sort of burns out in terms of like keeping the people's attention that would play a game like a Hearthstone or like a Magic Online or a Magic Arena or something like that. Like, I don't playing Marvel Snap. I look back at these other card games. I'm like, there's no reason why I'm going to sit in a card game for 50 minutes. Like Land Go doesn't make sense. It shouldn't be a turn cycle in a card game. It doesn't make any sense. It's a waste of time. You can cut it out. And Marvel Snap did that perfectly. But when we condense everything, when we make every turn have to feel like a dopamine hit, try to make every decision matter, does it lead to that situation where it feels like no decisions matter? Does it make it feel flat? Does it make it feel boring? The answer is I don't know, but I think that's the only thing that can stop Marvel Snap from being a categorically better card game.
How does a control archetype work in a game that doesn't last 50 minutes? Because historically, when you talk about control, right, you talk about, okay, well, this match is going to go to time. Every single match that I play with this deck will go to time as mirror matches. So how in your mind does a control archetype look in a condensed game? Like let's talk about it in terms of Marvel Snap, but then also like looking outside of Marvel Snap in a game where you're land go, cutting out things that don't need to be there.
Yeah, so it would extend past Marvel Snap. We can use an example. So disruption, right? So I'm sort of affecting your ability to play your cards on sort of the curve that you want to, or at the exact time you want to, or on the location you want to. I'm taxing your cards, right? I'm making them more expensive. I'm also getting asymmetric information, right? Like I'm seeing the cards you're going to play before you do, like Daredevil or Kang, where I get to see your turn, then we get to replay it, and we get to do it again.
Kang was interesting. I came across Kang the other day. It was crazy. It was really cool. I'd like that. Cool.
Kang is my favorite card in the game because it's really debatable whether the opportunity cost of having it in your deck is worth it, but it prevents you with a scenario where you have an asymmetric risk because you get to see what the other player is going to do, and this is on turn 6, and you get to restart and do it again, but you presented the opposing player with the scenario with like the two donkeys between the doors or whatever. You've shown them the door where they they've played their winning play, you've restarted the turn and you haven't left the game, which signals to them that their winning play that was last turn is a losing play now. So they switch, but that means that they get to play 2 plays and that they've effectively like gotten less. It's weird, right? But it's mitigated by the fact that you can snap people on turn 6 by playing Kang, and then they leave and you get the cubes. But if you snap them, they have to stay in, and then Kang restarts the turn and unsnaps. That's the BS of Kang. It unsnaps.
Oh,
the
it
game,
unsnaps?
So it unsnaps. So you
I didn't
free
know
roll.
that.
Yeah.
Oh,
So you free
wow.
roll. Yeah, you free roll.
Wow.
So it's like an asymmetric risk. It's really interesting. But yeah, I think that like, taxing your opponent, getting more information, disrupting where they can play their cards or when they can play their cards, et cetera, is sort of what control is in a game like that.
All right. I don't think we've talked about this. We may have talked about this topic on the podcast before. You might remember, might not. You had a tweet out not that long ago talking about gold fishing and how important or not important you think it is. I was wondering if you could talk about gold fishing and kind of go into what gold fishing is. And I'm curious as to how important do you think gold fishing is in trading card games?
So it's funny because what that it was a short and it was cut from a part where the co-host of mine, he goldfishes a lot, but I actually don't. But I do specifically for the hero that we talked about, which is Kano in Flesh and Blood, because Kano is such a one-sided solitaire experience that subjecting an opposing player, especially in my testing team, to sit on the other side of the board is actually not helpful for anybody, because it really doesn't matter what they do, right? Like it doesn't matter if you're playing Kano. So that's a deck that you can goldfish, right? And I think repetition and pattern recognition is how people become successful with that deck. It's I would say it's not a complicated deck, but it's seen as a complicated deck that's a bit of a glass cannon, right? Can fold to a lot of opposing things. So because of that, it's not played very much, but it does come down to being able to recognize patterns, being able to do simple math based off heuristics, and knowing when you can combo off and when you can't. I think the goldfishing gives you the repetition that you need to be able to recognize those things.
Okay. When I first heard about the term goldfishing, I thought it was really weird, but then I started doing it. Do you know where did that term originate? Because
No
I don't
idea.
know. Okay, I don't. No. Do you know?
MTG Goldfish.
MTG Goldfish.
I have no idea. I just know I've been doing it since like around 2005 with Yu-Gi-Oh! I didn't even know what it was called. I just would do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like everybody just doesn't know what it's called at some point. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about casting before we're at an hour and 20 almost. Holy cow. This is crazy. All right, let's talk about casting. So you first got into card games with Flesh and Blood, which is still blowing my mind. How did you get into casting? How did that come about?
Yeah, so it's pretty much through podcasting. First of all, like that's the path of how you get there. In terms of being able to cast, I did get a few earlier opportunities to cast in Flesh and Blood. So there was a 2020 pre-COVID, which if you lived through 2020 wasn't much of 2020. So like very early COVID, where they put on an in-person tournament in New Zealand before everything got shut down, and they needed some casters. And me, Sasha, and my co-host Hayden Dale, we did it virtually. So we cast that tournament. So that was like my first exposure. Then I used to run this Discord gauntlet every week where we'd have like 60 to 80 players like come play through a webcam based Flesh and Blood tournament. Yeah, we put up like a case every time, and I would cast it with my friend Dante, and we did that for months. Which is insane. I can't believe I did that nowadays because it was ridiculous. Took up like 8 hours of my Monday at night. But yeah, so that definitely helped and gave me like a little bit of material that I could at least show whatever powers may be that I had done it before. But yeah, my first casting gig, my first casting gig was the World Championships with Flesh and Blood. That was like the first. Yeah, that was like the first kind of gig I did. I did some smaller stuff, like one smaller thing. Like I said, it was the virtual calling, and then one thing in Columbus with Realm Games. But yeah, ultimately it was pretty much the World Championships of Flesh and Blood. And I think I got that opportunity because for the past, 2 years it's been now, I've been speaking about the game from like a strategic point of view to, to these players. So I think that's what helped me for sure. Cause it's an interesting topic because getting into casting now, especially after the scene sort of develops, it's really tough, and it's a grind for sure. So I was lucky enough to have the podcast.
So again, we talk about opportunity with Disney Lorcana, right? Like, I know that's been talked about in some circles about people thinking about casting. I know Flake has mentioned it. I don't know. Would you do it? Would you want to do that? Yeah,
for sure. And I would be lying if I didn't say that's part of the motivation for having the podcast, is being able to help facilitate opportunities like that. Like, there's we can get into it of like why I switched from pro play to casting, but casting is I think if you enjoy it, if other people think you're good at it, et cetera, it's a great way to sustainably interact with the game over a long period of time.
Yeah. So, man, what was my question? Oh, I know what the question was. Okay. Well, we'll get into that in 1 second. But how did that first casting gig go? Being at the you said World Championships. How did that go for you?
It went well. So the only thing that didn't go well was I was a little bit loud, and my microphone needed to be turned down a little bit on the back end, which it wasn't. I heard it didn't end up being bad, but I was louder than I would have expected. It's because I'd done a previous gig like a week before, a small one, but I'd been too quiet because the mic was too quiet. I was just a little bit too loud. But outside of that, it was like,
what
it was
are the
absolutely
audio
smooth.
engineers doing? Come on, guys.
I was pretty bummed when I heard how loud I was. But anyway, it was smooth. It was smooth sailing, to be honest. I tested for that tournament like I was going to play it. So I tested with my professional team, helped them prepare, etc. And I was doing analysis, so it felt very natural. I was also casting alongside, my friends that I've made for the past 2 years, right? So Tana Grace, Flake, awesome. Brian Gottlieb, Doa, all that. So yeah, it was really easy, to be honest.
I was gonna say, how easier does an experience make when you're doing it alongside your friends like that?
1,000 times easier, especially a public speaking, especially a public speaking thing where you're like trying to regulate this sort of tonality of your voice, and you want to be able to provide like meaningful commentary, and I think that's a play, like that's a role that you can fill, and it's easy to get insecure and not be confident. And I think that those two things are key to putting on a successful broadcast and providing value to the audience. So being alongside people that I was comfortable with and people I consider my friends was like, you can't ask for more as a first time experience.
So you talked about stepping back from professional play a little bit because of casting. Was casting a big reason that you kind of step back from playing professionally?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's pretty much the main reason I stepped away from professional play. I had when I went to the tournament in Austin in 2019, and I met James and I met Sasha at that first tournament, I told James, I was like, my ultimate goal in this game is to be a caster. And then at the first big US tournament back in 2021 in Vegas, they offered me a casting gig, and I said no because I thought I was going to win. I thought I was going to win the tournament. So I said no. And then it took me about a year after that to finally get something when I came back around to it. But ultimately, strategically, it's way better to take the first one, because once that group of casters kind of gets assigned, like it's tough to win. I had to be lucky to do it. But they did offer me at the Vegas one. And I said no. I came off the back of, we had these regional tournaments called Road to Nationals. I came off the back of winning 5 of them in a row, which I don't know if anybody else did. I think there was maybe one guy in New York that did it. So like that was when I was at the top of my game, and I was like, okay, I think I'm going to win this. I want to be a pro player. And then Michael Hamilton started playing Flesh and Blood, so I quit.
I love that how he's like, my end game was to be a caster. That's what I want to do. I'm going to not cast this tournament.
Well, okay. What was going through your head at that time? Was it just because you really thought you were going to win? Is that kind of your mindset at the time?
I really thought I was going to win. I put a lot of effort into it. I was the best I'd ever been at that point. And I thought, as arrogant as it sounds, I thought I was better than everybody else. And that's why I turned it down. It's like, I just thought I was going to win. And obviously after that, I was like, okay, if I win this, I'm just going to keep winning. It's like the professional player sort of hubris. It's like, right. I thought that was what I wanted to do at the time, because of the sort of recency bias of my success and the work we'd been putting in.
Right.
But ultimately, I would not want to be a professional Flesh and Blood player for 10 years. I think it would be not fun.
Well, you got to have that mindset though. Like, would you agree? You have to have that mindset of, I think I'm the best. I think I'm going to win this in order to win.
I think if you want to consistently win major Flesh and Blood tournaments, you have to want to be the world champion. And that doesn't mean you're competing at Worlds. I mean, if you want to win callings, if you want to even win battle hardens, I think you have to want to be the best. The game, I think almost to a fault, is very low variance and sort of kind of skill intensive. And I'm not saying that to us. I really hope that doesn't come off as like stroking like an ego or something. We talk about it from a design standpoint as being a fault by now because it's so prohibitively hard for new players to sort of enter the game and start winning and seeing success.
Okay.
But it's great for professional players. Like it's the perfect game.
Yeah. Well, one thing you talked about it as casting giving players opportunities to meaningfully interact with the game over a longer period of time. My brain initially went to football, like professional sports, because you see so many different players. I think Tom Brady was just they gave him an offer for like, I don't know, some massive contract that was like higher than I think it was higher than his player contracts for some of them. But anyway, we see all these players, professional players, go straight from playing the game to casting. And that just clicked in my mind, like that.
Those who can't do, teach.
Well, but I wonder, like, how much of it is the opportunity to meaningfully interact with the game that they've developed this love for over an extended period of time? Like, is that a big reason for you in casting, like being able to meaningfully interact?
So, like, if I was going to try to play professionally in Flesh and Blood, and you're going to spend thousands of dollars to travel to tournaments, you're going to travel the world, and not in a good way, but like in the bad way of traveling the world where it takes, you're taking time off work, you're taking time away from loved ones, you're spending a lot of money, and, you're living cheap. Like that is one way to play the game. Can I do that for 10 years? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that if you're the champ, if you're winning all the time and that's what you love doing, you can. But it wasn't what I loved doing. When I found out what I loved about Flesh and Blood was the people, right? And what's the best way to keep maximizing that part of Flesh and Blood? To get paid to go there, right? Yeah. Not to win money, but to get paid to go there. And yeah, that might sound a bit opportunistic, but like that's how it is. Like these things are, to do this stuff for 10 years, like you had to find a way that you can interact with the game that's sustainable, I feel like. And that's what podcasting is to me. And that's what casting is.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to say this, and I've said this. If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. Find your why. And you are another good example of your why being involved in these games is the people, and it's the community. Like that's what's keeping you in it. And my advice to everyone, for whether it be gaming or whatever you're doing, find that why, because that why is going to keep you doing the thing that you enjoy doing and you love doing. The moment you stray away from that, you're going to lose interest. You're going to lose kind of everything, your reason for getting into that. So, no, that's awesome.
You're 100% right. You're 100% right. And I think that once you understand and find your why, find the way to maximize it. Right. And then that's the path you take. For me, it was like, as soon as I found the why, I was like, okay, I just doubled down the podcasting. I doubled down on casting, because this will make sure that I can keep getting that why for as long as I want.
Well, all right. So last question for this, but what would be your advice to somebody who wants to look to maybe get into casting, let's phrase it in that way. What would be your advice to someone looking to get into casting for Flesh and Blood for any game? Like, what would your advice be for someone looking to get into that profession?
It's tough because I feel like I could give the advice that would be needed, but it's not the path that I took. The path that I took, to be completely transparent, was mostly out of nepotism, right? Like I had a podcast. It was a bigger podcast in Flesh and Blood had been around since very early. I'd had friends that worked at the company. I was friends with the casters. That makes everything 5 million bajillion times easier, 100%. But at the same time, I planted those seeds a long time ago, right? If you wanted to get into casting now and something like Flesh and Blood, you're going to have to develop a portfolio, right? You're going to need to do smaller gigs. You're going to probably need to do some stuff that maybe doesn't pay that well. But I know Flesh and Blood is working to expand their sort of battle hardened coverage league. There's people like Nansent putting on coverage for these callings and these kind of events. You need to be doing that. You need to get a portfolio. You need to get material that you can present to people that is a compelling reason of why you should you should be on the booth. And then I think it's really tough. I think that casting is, to be a caster, and what I see from the most successful casters out there these days is that they're not only casters, they're also content creators, and they have large followings. I think the larger your following is on something like Twitter, which is kind of cynical, and I'm not a fan of it either, but it's just a fact, the more likely you are to get a casting gig. Because I have this hilarious story. I have 2,000 followers on Twitter, which is not a lot, but you're going to learn why. And someone at my local game store was like, someone else was talking about the casting team for World Championships. He's like, dude, I can't believe who they picked. They had someone there with like 2,000 followers.
Yeah, that's me, guy.
I was just like, what a bozo.
What an guy. Yeah, what an idiot. I gotta go.
I am not kidding. That 100%. He had no clue that was the 2000 Andy.
Did you know him? Did you know who that person was?
No, it was just some random local.
Some random local.
That's funny. All right. Well, my final question before we move on to one of my favorite segments is running. I understand that you torture yourself with running. I think are you training for a marathon, half marathon right now?
Yeah. So I did a half of like 3. Why? Yeah. So good questions. I've been running for about 4 months. So I never ran before that. I did sports. So I did like wrestling in high school. I played collegiate rugby for 4 years. And despite all of that physical activity, I freaking hated running. Like if I got the sniff that there was going to be a longer run exercise on a workout, I wasn't showing up. Period. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I sucked at it. I could not do it. I believed that I could not run. I was not built for it, et cetera, et cetera. So we had done this Fab Fitness challenge like 8-9 months back that was really successful around the community. And I was just like, I'm just going to do the hardest thing I can. This was after the fitness challenge. A couple of months later, I was like, I'm going to do the hardest thing I can possible and kind of document it. And for me, I couldn't think of anything more that I hated more, that had more power over me than running. And ultimately, that's what it came down to, is I was like, it had legitimate power over me. Like I believed I could not run far. I genuinely believed I couldn't do it, and I was scared of it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to run a marathon in 3 months. So yeah, I ran the Austin half marathon a couple of weeks. Yeah. Like 3 weeks ago. I was planning to run a marathon, but I got a pretty nasty like sinus infection the day, like a week before my girlfriend got it, gave it to me. So I ended up running a half instead. But yeah, I've got another marathon here on May 29th in Ventura, California, but I'll probably do another half. I think I got to work up a little longer to the marathon. Like, yeah, I'm just trying to get my half time down. I went for the half marathon time I went for in Austin, Texas was 2 hours and 30 minutes. And I got I'm not kidding. I got 2:29:59 and I was not looking at the clock.
Wow.
I'm not kidding. And when I crossed the finish line, it said 2:35 something, because they started for the first person that crossed. And mine was after. So I actually thought I missed it, and I was like super bummed. And then someone pulled that up and I was like, oh my God. But yeah, it's mainly to eliminate something that, like, the one major thing that I just, I felt like I legitimately could, I had every excuse in the world, like asthma when I was young, never was good at it, all that stuff. So, I had really bad shin splints when I was playing rugby. So a million reasons why I couldn't. I was like, I'm just going to do this.
Wow. That's awesome.
You going to go for the sub 4-hour marathon?
No chance.
All right. Understood.
You guys know that you sub 4 hours. So like sub 4 hours, like that's a very like normal people can do sub 4 hour, which is crazy to me because I could not. No way I can. You guys have heard of the Boston Marathon, right?
Yes.
What do you think? What do you think the time qualification is for the Boston Marathon?
Yeah, I hear that one was the bomb.
Oh my God.
That was so bad.
Oh, my mistake. Was it too soon? It's been a couple of years, I thought. I forgot we were recording.
Wow. I cannot believe that. All right. Okay, back to I'm just gonna try to ignore that.
We're gonna edit that out.
So time qualification. I 4:30? 4:30?
Sub 3.
Sub 3.
Yeah.
Whoa. That's crazy.
It depends on your age group, but yeah, I believe it's sub 3, which is like the most heinous, just ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my life. It's like, and like you could reasonably I've run into people, I feel like, in my lifetime, like, yeah, I qualified for Boston. I never knew what that meant. And now it's like,
Wow.
I'm just like, holy shit.
Wow, that's crazy. Well, I will tell you, Brendan, like that's pretty inspiring. The fact that you looked at that as an obstacle and it was the thing that you feared and just said, no, I'm going to do it, mind over matter. I think that mentality is what you need to be successful in card games, right? In life in general, but like, let's apply it to the entire conversation we've been having. I think that mentality is key to being successful and good in these card games, right? Is that whole your mind over everything. And that's pretty inspiring, man.
David Goggins.
100%. I love David Goggins, man. That guy is a monster. He's insane. And he is, I mean, if I ever met that guy, I feel like I would just like shiver and be like, I cannot measure up to anything that you do. Like it's that he would be so very intimidating for me to just stand next to. But yeah. I love David Goggins.
Pretty interesting race, the one that he did. It's like a ultra marathon through Death Valley up to like the highest peak. Yep. I can't some backwater something. Yeah, it's crazy, right? What you realize once you start doing this kind of like, because I came from nothing in terms of running, right? Like most I run was a couple miles. You realize that like there is freaking levels to this. Like it is ridiculous. Like there is super normal people that you will meet that are just absolutely crushing anything you thought was humanly possible.
Yep. And I'll tell you now, my dad's one of them. My dad a couple of years ago started picking up running. Last year he did the Chicago Triathlon. Wow. I went down there and watched him do it. I was super proud of him. But I mean, I joke with him a lot that he gave all his weight to me. He just transferred all of his weight to me. I'm like, thanks. Like I used to stand next to him and feel good about myself. Now I feel worse about myself standing next to him. But all that being said, I'm very proud. I was very proud of him when he did that, and he's not stopping. He has gotten in insanely good shape. That's cool. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Like, I think that's awesome. I think that's a great message to share with people as well, for sure. So, all right. Well, with all of that, we're gonna move on to our favorite segment, of the day. That's the card of the week. Yay. Card of the week. This week is brought to you by Brendan Patrick. Brendan, can you tell us what this week's card of the week is?
Yeah, so it's Aether Wildfire. I hope there's an image popped up because I don't know if I can read the text from mine. But yeah, so Aether Wildfire is an interesting card in Flesh and Blood because it's probably the most powerful card, but probably one of the least played cards in the game. It's led to most of the success that me and my team have had on these professional circuits has been due to Aether Wildfire. But the reason why I like the card is because Flesh and Blood, due to the nature of the resource system and the cards you attack with become resources as well, et cetera, it's a very mathy game. Like the game exists on some sort of base equation, and everything tries to equalize around like a core value of 8 or 4, but most people go with 8, right? And Aether Wildfire in no way exists on that spectrum and completely breaks every sort of math rule of the game, but at the same time, it's a super clunky card. It's hard to play. It's like it has to do like some sort of complicated and somewhat convoluted combo. But once you understand this card, the math becomes really easy because it's heuristic based, and we deal with values that are base 32. So the life total, starting life total in Flesh and Blood is 40. The base damage of an Aether Wildfire combo can be around 32 if you have the number of resources you should have. That's a lot. We're talking crazy. Like the most damage you'll see on like a card that costs 2 like this is like 6 damage. So this is 32 base. Obviously needs supporting cards, but it's in Flesh and Blood. We talk a lot about math because it's honestly people understanding the math of Flesh and Blood and understanding values of cards is why they become successful and why people don't. And we have this conversation a lot, just like at these tournaments, and people, analyze cards, and there's always this back and forth conversation. What's good, what's not, why these decks are successful, why these players are successful, why they brought this card, that card. And we always, Kano is like the outlier, and people are like, Kano doesn't make any sense. Like the math is terrible. All of Kano's cards, the rest of the cards are really underrated. Like this card is technically like a 2 for 4, right? That's super underrated. 2 for 6 is like the base, but when combined with the right cards and combined with the right play pattern, it's not 2 for 4. It's
32 for whatever 32, the number is.
Exactly. 2 for 32 base. Like it's insane. I really like this card in Flesh and Blood because it breaks the game, in my opinion.
If there's one thing I've learned about card games is just because there's like a flow to the game, like you were saying, like the 2 for 8 or 2 for 6, whatever it is, combo always doesn't care about that. Combo is, I want to do my combo and the game's over. It doesn't matter what every other person is going for their specific rule or how the meta is shaped out to be. It's if I can just kill you in one turn, it doesn't matter all that math we just went for the rest of everyone else. Combo goes around it.
Yeah. So if you guys come from a Magic background or you understand Magic decks, this deck in Flesh and Blood, this is Amulet Titan in Flesh and Blood.
Oh, he loves it.
I love Amulet Titan.
He has it.
Yeah. I'm 100%. I'm looking at it right over there. There's right Amulet Titan. But when you were talking about that, I'm like, this is reminding me of Amulet Titan. I should play this deck.
Oh, it's not a deterministic combo, and the pieces you can use to assemble the combo are very dynamic, and they very much depend on the current state of the game.
Well, when I started playing Amulet Titan, and I think the reason I picked up Amulet Titan was I like green, but I also, when I started playing combo decks, I'm like, man, I just love the play patterns, the problem solving, like in the moment that I have to try and do to figure out how to get my combo. And I immediately fell in love with Amulet Titan and just those play patterns and just figuring out on the fly, how can I beat you here? How can I win? And so and that's one of the things I love about card games, right? Is these different archetypes, right? And I fell in love with combo, with the combo strategies and just those types of decks. And but yeah, I that was just immediately where my mind went to, and I loved it 100%.
There's a sort of a vernacular question I have, because I think that not all combo decks are the same, but they all really fall under the word combo, and I think it can be really misleading. So if you think about a deck like Amulet Titan or Legacy Elves as a combo deck, but then you think of something like a Legacy Painter, or maybe like a Splinter Twin, like
some Charbelter,
yeah. Like a 2-card combo deterministic win versus a deck like Amulet Titan. They're both combo, but they could not be, I think, further from each other in terms of like play patterns and like what they're trying to do. Yeah. And Flesh and Blood is like that too. We don't have 2-card combos, but it's hard to be like, there is another combo deck in Flesh and Blood called Bolton, and it will effectively just like draw the right cards eventually. And it just kind of if it draws the right cards, it vomits its hand and it wins the game. The Kano deck is not like that at all, right? It's a solitaire deck, but at the same time, it's dynamic. It can adapt to anything. It's like the actual card, the specific card you play for the combo can be multiple different things. I don't know how to sort of delineate between that combo and this combo.
And that's it.
You guys use?
Well, that's a good question, right? I don't know. Do you have an answer?
I really don't know.
because I mean I think we use these terms combo, tempo, whatever the case may be, right? As a very generalized term of gives you an idea of how the deck plays and how the deck functions, right? So, but I also think the combo archetype can vary so widely. Like control is control.
I was going to say, maybe rather than how the deck is played, I think it's more of how does the deck win? Because we talk about Splinter Twins, and that's a combo deck, except you're playing Is It Control until you win the game with Splinter Twins.
Yeah, that's true.
And then like even in post board, you could just bring in a bunch more control spells and then just win through the attrition setup. So it's like, because then you also look at how Amulet Titan works. You just have a lot of like pretty good cards until you just instantly kill them with Amulet Titan of attack with haste and get in there, make the Valakuts and then just blow them up. So you're still playing like really good cards.
Yeah.
It's also like what is the combo? Like there's like these 2-card combos, but then there's like combo elves, right? Like the combo that you do in like Legacy Elves is like
You got to build up.
very dynamic, right? Like it's like you couldn't draw up one single way to combo off of elves. You could write out the win condition, but that's not the combo, right?
Right.
And I think that like that's a huge difference. Like you're right. There is a control magic shell in Splinter Twin, but ultimately that is the win condition. But like you look at like a deck like elves or something like that. Like there is that single win condition, but the actual combo you're pulling off is like much more lengthy. I feel like the decision trees like kind of go much wider out, and they give you a lot more agency as the combo player. But I think that the answer is like we don't have a word for it. Like there is no word. Right. It all just falls under combo.
Burn is also a 7-card combo. You just get 7 bolts to their face and you win the game.
We have a meme for that in Flesh and Blood. There's a really, really boring fatigue deck called Oldhim Fatigue. And we call it Oldhim Fatigue combo. It's like I block you out, I win the game combo. It's like you literally do nothing. You don't play the game at all. You just throw your hand down every turn. Combo.
Yeah. Well, before we get out of here, I do have to say I love the fact where before we're on this call, we talk about, oh yeah, I'm not a big Magic player, but I know Magic. And he's talking about all these decks as if like he knows them. 100% he knows them. I'm like, that's awesome.
He said he went ham into researching Magic.
Correct.
So
Correct.
I watched a lot of old coverage, like an obscene amount. Like I think I've watched most Pro Tours, most World Championships, and a lot of GPs.
How's it feel about
10 years, 5 years after? That one, I don't think I've seen that one. I usually went for, was that a standard Pro Tour? It was.
Yeah,
right?
It was. Yeah.
I usually don't go standard. I usually go modern or legacy because it's
Rivals of Ixalan, I think was the last modern one. Yeah.
That's funny.
Was it Yuya? Wait, no, Rivals of Ixalan. Who won that?
I just know that it was Lantern Control
like,
was the winner.
Oh yeah, that was Seth Manfield, I think, right?
Yeah, I don't know who was piloting.
Who is this? This is crazy.
Ladies
and gentlemen, this is what research looks like. Okay, this is what research looks like.
Doesn't matter how long you've been in the game. It matters how much effort you put into the game.
Well, okay. When I first started playing Magic, when I first played a game with AJ, and he said, "Oh yeah, I just picked up Magic within like the year." He's naming off all these cards. I'm like, dude. You said you just started playing and you know all these, you know what everything does. Who are you? That's crazy. That's insane.
I've never played a game of competitive Magic, like at a Grand Prix level or anything like that. Never.
That's crazy to me. Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, this is what research looks like. Just look at the face of Brendan Patrick right here, Mr. Research. That's crazy. So, all right. Well, that is this week's card of the week. Our first Flesh and Blood card. I don't have an opinion that it's this card, Aether Wildfire. All I know is that when I read this card, we're both like, this card does what? This is crazy.
I love all burn cards, Dan.
Yes. Yeah, we know, Jim. So, all right. Well, Brendan, thank you so much. This was an awesome conversation. I absolutely loved every second of this. So thank you very much. But Brendan, can you tell our audience where can people find you and your content on the internet?
Yeah, honestly, probably the best hub is just @BrendanAPG on Twitter. Everything is there. I do Marvel Snap stuff, Lorcana stuff, and Arsenal Pass stuff. And yeah, I talk on the internet, I guess.
It's the guy that talks on the internet.
I'm going to put that in my bio now, a guy that talks on the internet. So, all right. Well, Brendan, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. Hope you had a good time because I know that we did. So thanks a lot, man.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Who here feels 10 times smarter than they did before they listened to that conversation?
I can't go to 2,000 IQ, Dan. I can't go to 2,000 IQ.
I made the comment after we ended that call with that was the first interview that I really felt like I didn't need my questions.
Yeah.
I did not need this at all because it felt like it flowed so naturally.
Yeah.
And we were able to just continue and continue and continue. And that was one of the best conversations I felt like we've had on this podcast.
I was telling Dan afterwards, and I was just like, I think we could talk to that guy for hours.
Oh yeah.
Hours easily.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
Like if we were just chilling at like a tournament randomly, we would lose track of rounds and we would just DQ. We'd go X and 2.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
We just get disqualified because we lost so much time just talking about stuff.
Yeah. So, guys, let us know down below in the comments if you enjoyed that conversation because you know what? We did. And you know what? One other thing we would love to know, if there's anyone else in the community that you would want us to see have a conversation with, let us know down below. Shoot us a comment, shoot us an email, and let us know if there's somebody that you think would be a good fit for a guest on this podcast. We would love to know. And you know what, Jim? Where can people find you on the internet?
Oh, yeah. You guys can find me on Twitter, Twitch, and Instagram at Jim Morgan, HNH.
You guys can find me on Twitter at _DG Campbell and on Instagram at Daniel.G.Campbell. Head over to our website, www.hobbiesandhappiness.com. You can find links to all of our content there, take you to YouTube, pretty much all of our stuff there. And you know what? If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button so you can be notified whenever we release new content on the channel. And you know what? Again, thanks everybody for being here. This was a lot of fun, and I really hope to talk to Brendan again at some point down the road. But all right, thanks everybody for being here, and we'll catch you in the next episode. See you, everybody.
Take care.